Welcome to Inside PTI, weekly videos designed to get you the trial results you want, agronomy explanations you need, and hopefully insights that will set you up for success this growing season. Today we're going to talk about saturated cold germ testing, and this is something that we do each and every year. We get all of the corn seed delivered to our farm that we're going to plant, and we take small portions of the seed, every lot number that we have. So multiple hybrids may have different lot numbers, but we separate it by lot number. We take a small portion of the seed and we send it into the lab to get it tested. Now, why are we testing this seed? Well, what we're hoping to do is come up with some type of a pre-stress test. Everybody, when they plant corn, wants that perfect stand of corn, right? And I know sometimes it can be hard to get. But there is a pre-stress test that farmers can do to help analyze their seed that they're going to plant. There's some seed that just can't handle cold and wet conditions in the spring. So our goal is we want to hold it back and plant it when conditions may be a little bit warmer. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we're doing at the PTI farm. So, this hits home to a lot of folks because this past spring we had a lot of saturated soils and they were cold. Here's a heat gun on top of my corn planting date study that I had at PTI. That's 41 degrees where we have very saturated soils. That's a pretty tough drink of water for that corn seed. And remember, that's the first drink of water that corn seed sees once we plant it. And this can wreak havoc with some corn lot numbers or hybrids that just can't take this type of environment. So what we do is we send this seed off, okay? We package this seed up in a Ziploc bag, and we send it off to a lab. There's multiple labs you can go to. We send ours to Midwest Labs or Illinois Crop Improvement. But you can send your seed off, and what we do is we test it for three things. We do a warm germination test, a cold germination test, and then really the one we're looking for that pre-stress test is a cold saturated germination test. Now, let's go through each one of these and talk about what they are. Now, warm germ test is where we take seed, we place it in moist soil at 77 degrees, and we leave it in the chamber for 7 days. This simulates a farmer planting in ideal warm soil temperatures, okay? It does not, however, predict how seeds will emerge or germinate under stressful, cold, and or wet soil. This is perfect conditions, okay? Now, we also do a cold germination test. This is where we take this seed, we put it in the lab in cold 50-degree soils, and we leave it in that chamber for 7 days, and then we transition it to 77 degrees for 4 days. And this simulates a grower planting into cold soils. This does not, however, predict cold and wet, only cold temperatures. Now, the pre-stress test, the one we're really looking to show whether this corn hybrid can handle stress, is our saturated cold germination test. This is where we take our seed, we put it in 100% saturated soils, and they're cold soils at 50 degrees. We leave them in the chamber for 7 days, and then we take them out, we transition it into 77-degree temperatures for the last 4 days. This simulates a grower planting in cold and wet soils. This is what we're trying to see. Is there some yield penalty to having low saturated cold germination scores? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little story about what happened at PTI this year. We tested all of our seed, and I want to tell you about two hybrids that came in. And we'll just call the hybrids Hybrid A and Hybrid B. Hybrid A comes in with a 99% warm germ and a 99% cold germ. It doesn't get much better than that. Those are high scores, all right? Hybrid B, it comes in just about the same, 98% warm, 99% cold. Those are very good, but it doesn't tell the whole story. The whole story is this. The saturated cold germ percentage just told a totally different story. Hybrid A came in at 87%, and that is a very good cold germ score, saturated cold germ score. It's very good. However, Hybrid B came in at 40%. That means only 40% of the seeds actually germed out, okay? So that was the situation when we put it under cold and wet conditions. It struggled. That's the pre-stress test that we're talking about. I took that seed that tested out at 40% and I planted it this past year. And I planted it the last week of April. Those were tough, cold, and wet conditions. You saw the heat gun earlier. That was the conditions it was in. And with that 40% saturated cold germ score, that hybrid planted April 26th in those cold, wet conditions. I only saw 15,000 stands. 15,000 seeds. When I dropped 36,000 seeds, actually came up out of the ground. Now, you go to hybrid A that had the 87% cold germ, planted in those same tough, cold, wet conditions in April. I got 33,000 live plants out of it, out of the ground, again, dropping 36,000. But that was a big difference. I mean, it cut populations virtually in half, right, with a 40% cold germ saturated score. I waited. I planted the same 2 hybrids again, okay, on June 5th. That's when the soils warmed up. We got fit again, and we planted. We were in ideal planting conditions. And that hybrid B that tested out at 40% with the saturated cold germ, it now gave me 34,000 live stands when I dropped 36,000. You see how the whole situation changed? It didn't like the cold, wet conditions. We predicted that with our saturated cold germ test. When we planted it in those cold, wet conditions, it really struggled. When we removed the cold, wet weather, it did completely fine. It gave us some really nice stands in the field. So what did it cost us? Knowing that it was 40%, but saying, yeah, let's just go to the field and plant it anyway, it cost us almost 56 bushel to the acre. And that's what we're trying to have not happen. Get that prediction factor, that pre-stress test, so these losses don't happen. You know, that yield loss per acre, if you take that to the price of corn this past year, we're using $3.67 for our corn price this year. That's over a $200 potential economic loss. But again, a $25 saturated cold germ test told us that this potentially could have happened, and then we could reposition, hold the hybrid back, and plant it when maybe conditions are going to be warmer. One of the neat things, I shouldn't say neat, but interesting things about a saturated cold germ test is I don't think a lot of farmers are doing it. And fortunately, there's a lot of seed companies that do this and produce very good seed, so we don't have to worry about it. But we are doing the testing, and we're coming up with some low scores, okay? But there's just not a lot of people out here doing it. We've asked growers at some of our agronomy meetings that we've traveled around the countryside doing, and about 18% of farmers say, yes, we are doing saturated cold germ tests. And the interesting thing with that is most of the 18% are seed dealers that are testing the seed, making sure their customers are having the best experience possible from buying that corn hybrid. So some interesting data that we found this winter traveling around the country. So today's Inside PTI agronomy tip of the day is, you know, for $25, a grower can stress test their corn hybrids that they're going to plant and possibly find those that may not perform well in cold and saturated soils. Now, we are not advocating that a poor saturated germ test score means that the corn hybrid is bad or it's one that should be returned, but yet this information can be helpful to determine when to plant a corn hybrid. In other words, maybe if a hybrid comes back with a poor saturated germ test score, it just means that we don't plant it first. And maybe we wait until the threat of cold and saturated soils goes away. Maybe it's later in the planting window. So for more information or questions, feel free to reach out to any Precision Planting Premier dealer, or you can email us at InsidePTI@precisionplanting.com. We'll see you on the next episode of Inside PTI. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching.